Hello, and welcome to another edition of Jolene's Book and Writers Talk. Today we'll be speaking with Dr. Pamela Gray. She is an author of Power Your Decision Self-Study Workbook, also is a speaker, a educator, and a philanthropist. Dr. Gray established the Advancing Mind Foundation in 2015. The foundation promotes universal truths and principles as taught by the greats of the New Thought movement while supporting education and nonprofit organizations throughout the United States and abroad. Since the year 2000, Dr. Gray has also been a licensed practitioner with the Centers for Spiritual Living. She spent 17 years on academic campuses, having served as an assistant scholar for higher education at the University of Florida and the director for distance learning at the Holmes Institute, which offers a master's consciousness study degree. A prominent business owner in North Florida, Dr. Gray received her doctorate in adult and community college education from North Carolina State University and her master's degree in human resource economics from the University of Utah. And today we're going to be talking about her workbook and her process and what she hopes to accomplish with her new writing career. So take it away,
Yes,
Dr. Gray.
I'm Dr. Pamela Gray, author of the workbook Power Your Decisions. I'm a former college administrator, faculty member, trained in adult education, who took the science of new thought and made a decision to bring a lot of the 20th and 21st century authors into our contemporary language and society and be able to help others like I was helped, how to make better decisions. And therefore, I wrote a workbook to take any reader of any age, really, in any situation, and walk them through a self-study so that they too can make some of the greatest decisions to improve their life.
And when did you first publish the book?
2019.
Okay, and then you update it occasionally.
I'm right now doing a second edition, which I think will be coming out in October, which is to take the workbook and have it be a complete standalone workbook. In other words, you can do it as a self-study with just one book.
Do you have any other books in mind that you would like to write in the future?
That's a great question. Working in the academic side of the world, I went from the public sector to the private. And I was a financial planner, owned my own financial firm. For 13 out of 22 years, I was in that particular field. And that afforded me the opportunity to mentor women in particular in the financial field. And that mentoring experience has been a positive force in my life. I've seen it really turn very competent, capable women into really successful business owners once someone is mentoring them through really the process of gaining personal confidence. I think there's a great opportunity to write about the perspective of a mentor, but also of a mentee, and why more women should be mentored to be much more successful, quicker and faster with the aid of someone who's knowledgeable, resourceful, and someone who can help them move quicker through the whole process of being a more confident person.
What would you say would be your top 3 tips for women of any age to start taking back their financial responsibilities and help them grow?
I think the first thing is to do what any successful person does. You need to surround yourself with competent people. Before I became a financial advisor, I had never had one. But I was very teachable and willing to learn to help others. And over the course of my years advising hundreds of families and business owners, individuals and couples, I realized what an important part I played in their life because I was an educator. I was a planner. I helped them look before they leaped. I help them navigate coming into large amounts of money and also working from a perspective of not having sufficient funds, but wanting to have them later in retirement. So the first thing is surround yourself with competent people. Having a financial advisor will more than compensate you for any expense Plus, you'll get tremendous guidance. So that would be number one. Number two is be a consistent, disciplined saver. Most people say, oh, well, I don't have enough. Oh, yes, you do. You actually have enough. You just need to make saving a personal priority because you're going to be an investor, not just for the few years that you work or for the last 10 years of your professional life, but you're going to be an investor throughout your entire lifetime. And it's not timing the market so much as it is time in the market to be successful in acquiring money and wealth over time. You don't have to start out with a lot, but having enough years to be a consistent saver is a huge benefit. And then I would say, lastly, be smart about the decisions you make as you are in your earning years, or when you get an inheritance, or let's say you have a windfall because you sold a piece of property, or somehow assets came to your hands. Recognize that there are choices you can make, and don't be too quick to make an immediate decision. Explore your options. Think about what you could do to be a good steward of that money. I've oftentimes found, Jolene, that people who went through a great deal of money typically had that money gifted to them or had it received through inheritance, and they were very quick to dispose of it, or to have people come in and say, oh, you owe me. Oh, as an ex-wife, you should give this to me. And I was really shocked how unprepared people were to have wealth. My job was to guide and offer advice. You really need to look at your options as you acquire more and more assets.
Authors get in the game kind of late in life because that's when they get their experience. But when they copyright their material with the government, it is a certificate. It is an inheritable asset for the future. And the copyright laws, as they stand now, says that material is copyrighted 75 years after the person passes away. Do you know anything about creating a family trust and putting assets in it, such as stocks and bonds and copyright certificates? How hard that is these days to set that up?
Well, I think that's another great question. Best, I think, to have an estate planning or elder attorney address that, or a good, competent, board certified estate planning attorney, many of whom I worked with over the years and introduced my clients to. I think the biggest barrier to why people don't do some planning is, first of all, they think it costs a lot of money to do that. Secondly, there's so many unanswered questions about their affairs that they think they have to have all the answers before they step in the office of a competent attorney. And I've always advised my clients at the time to say, your job isn't to have all the legal answers. Your job is to put forth what you're passionate about, what you hope to achieve, what assets you wish to carry forward for the benefit of your family, or sometimes it's a community organization with which they wish to be charitable with. An excellent attorney, someone who's dealt with a variety of these matters, can guide you through the process. And I can tell you that it's not phenomenally expensive. It's a way to be comprehensive in how you care about the people you love. You don't need an estate if you don't love anyone. But if you love someone and care about them, you'll want to do some planning, especially while you're healthy and well. That's the best time when we all do our best, we think our best, and we can ponder our different options, which are often posed by a good attorney. Don't ever be afraid to make that call. And oftentimes, if you, again, surround yourself with competent people, your financial advisor will be able to make that introduction to a competent attorney who will look after your best interests. So they can be your best friend to make those connections. The only other thing I would add, Jolene, is to have a good, competent CPA or financial accountant who can look after your tax questions and be able to guide you in making important decisions like selling your primary home. Are there any capital gain questions? Purchasing a second residence? Getting an inheritance? What am I due? How do I read the documents that the estate attorney for my parent or my Aunt Sue has shared with me. So those would be some of the things I think would be very important to posit with someone you trust.
Have you noticed over the last 20 years the quality of education of students coming in or lack thereof? I'm frustrated that they don't teach basic skills like money management and budgeting, sewing and laundry, and being able to take your finances kind of thing. When they get to college, they don't know what to do and they get in trouble with credit and stuff. What would you suggest to parents these days who are going to have to take the reins and teach these kids how to become critical thinkers and use common sense?
I'm sure that that's probably, time and eternity a question all parents wonder, what can I do to make my child responsible, self-sufficient, competent to make decisions and navigate challenge? I personally was never blessed with children, Jolene. I can't speak having been a parent. However, I can, having both taught young adults, not in the primary way, I was at the college and university level. I certainly worked with a lot of families who had young children, teenage children, young adults. And my observation is that oftentimes the child sort of mimics the way the parent handles their affairs. I think it depends on who the role model is for that young person. I've certainly seen people young for their age make great decisions, take on great initiative. And I've also seen the reverse, people who seem to wait for others to make those choices for them, which in the greater scheme of things all comes down to who's responsible for making the decision. Making the decision I go to college, making the decision if I should drive a car, making the decision if I should be a saver, making the decision when I move from home. I think it boils down to these fundamentals. If the parent is making the assumption that they're the better of the two decision makers, I think oftentimes the young adult is left in a very passive role. And unfortunately, it sort of entombs them in passivity. And they'll probably never make a decision of any consequence that they don't look for someone else to make for them. If it's not a parent, it might be a future spouse, or it might be a friend, or maybe someone who takes advantage of that person, who may not be really a friend. I think lending some credibility and walking a young adult through a process of making a good decision and helping them understand it is a process. You gather good information, you ask questions, you explore your options, you discuss it with people you trust, and then you make a choice. And I think the younger that young people make choices, or whether they make a good choice or not, but that they have some idea of the consequence. And the consequence doesn't have to be bad, it can be quite good. But there is always a cause and an effect. That's in science. It's also life in general. You start a process by making a choice or a decision, and there'll ultimately be an effect, a result. And unfortunately, a bone that I have to pick is too much debt. I am quite shocked that young people would select a career and not have asked a lot better questions of the university department chairs, counselors, as to where are their graduates going, what kind of jobs are they getting, what is the expectation for remuneration or salaries in that particular profession. I think looking ahead, kind of planning with the end result in mind, and then walking back through the academic institution who can best serve them would be a far better choice than just to allow a young person to meander through the academic system, rack up a great deal of expense with no understanding of the consequence that they will carry with them. And I think parents can play a very important role in helping them examine that and help them understand that there are consequences. And perhaps there are other alternative choices that could be very wonderful that a young person perhaps had not known how to seek out on their own. So exposing younger people to different professions, maybe even calling and setting up an appointment with your CPA and saying, hey, this is my daughter. She's thinking of going into a career in finance. Could we talk a little bit about what her expectations should be? I think there's many people willing to help and few people who ask.
Your particular book and workbook, who do you write for, or who were you writing for when you created that particular book? What
Mhm.
was your ideal reader?
I had contributed to academic chapters
Okay.
back when I was in higher education. But my inspiration to become a writer of nonfiction, and in particular a workbook, was not something I saw coming. When I had the aspiration to go from the public sector as a college administrator and faculty member to the private, when I had that aspiration, I was given a book. And that book was called The Power of Decision by Dr. Raymond Charles Barker. And one of my college presidents gave that book to me and he said, Pamela, if you're having a hard time knowing where to take your gifts and talents, if you read this book, you'll know exactly what to do. I thought that was too much to expect from a book, and I was wrong. It did change my life, and it changed the whole trajectory of my choices. I utilized that book and don't make a single big decision without referring back to the book. That's how clarifying it was. Being a teacher, I might have a tendency to critique other teachers. And I saw Dr. Barker's book being taught, and I said, I'd like to go attend a class and see how someone else would teach his book. And unfortunately, Jolene, it was poorly taught. And about the third class, in about an 8-week study, I said, well, I'm not going to return. I know the book hands down. How could you leave 25 adults just gasping for air, trying to figure out what's in this book? However, I looked in the mirror and said, well, Pamela, if you're that unhappy, why don't you do something about it?
Mm-hmm.
You know how to write for adults. I did not know, Jolene, it would take me 3 years to write that workbook. Being a type A personality, a perfectionist, I wanted to illustrate it. I wanted it to have flavor and feel. I wanted it to have vocabulary and context. And I wanted it not to rewrite the brilliance of these 20th century authors from the New Thought movement. I didn't want to rewrite, take away from anything from these spiritual giants. I just wanted to modernize the material so that people today could relate to it. You've probably heard the phrase, the spirit of the law or the letter of the law. Dr. Barker wrote the letter of the law. In other words, in declarative statements, here's what you do. He never taught how you did it. He just said, go forth and do. Now, he's been gone since the 60s, so there's no one really to teach that material, or a limited number of wonderful teachers around the world, but a limited number. I think today, any adult of any age is still making important decisions, could benefit, making even better decisions, but most of them don't know how. It's not a matter of academic smarts. There is a personal journey you can take. I know, because I've taken that journey myself every step of the way. So I wanted to customize the workbook to enhance that journey. And I wanted it to be portable, Jolene. Can go anywhere, any place. And so it had to be able to start at a beginning point and conclude at an ending and have all of the resources in that workbook so that you could go from A to Z. Now, I have field tested that book with teaching it myself, both across the country on Zoom and in small groups, doing it live. And I can tell you that all the resources are there. Not everyone is disciplined enough to do a self-study. So this is not for the faint of heart. This is not where some magical potion, you drink it and you're transformed. But for a person who wants to take a serious inquiry into what they could do and how they might discover where the important stumbling blocks are in their own thoughts or their own emotions or in their own life experiences, but more importantly, how to overcome that. Also, have a framework for understanding, well, how do I make better decisions? Is it completely a solo job? Is it something that only I can do? And I don't feel that way. I feel that we are remarkably well equipped as individuals, as human beings, to have all the important ideas we need to be successful in life. Your earlier question, where I remarked that I think too many people make decisions for other people, which also means that the individual isn't coming up with their own unique ideas that inspire them. And at the heart of my workbook, it's really all about gathering the most important fundamental ideas that are perfect for yourself, that can motivate you to fulfill an outcome that you really have a passion for. And I think we're all intuitively equipped with all of the answers. But here's maybe the catch. Making a good decision doesn't take time, but it does take practice. And why a workbook is so important, if it's done right, if it's done well, and I believe mine has been done well, is that it allows you to practice, rehearse. I give everyone the vocabulary that Dr. Barker never defined his words. And those words, some of those words weren't even in our vocabulary today. And some of the words we use today were not in his vocabulary. So I've tried to bridge that gap. But I believe fundamentally, everyone who has let's say, a spiritual side to themselves, I'm not trying to convert anyone to a religious point of view, but I do think people want to think that they have a relationship that's just bigger than themselves, with something that they can feel directed or guided by. I myself never called it God, but I did call it a creative intelligence. That I understood. I understood creativity and intelligence. Wow, if I could put that together in my own words, how powerful that can be. So my journey is one that touches upon the spiritual, meaning we look to something greater. But looking to something greater, if you can be open-minded enough, if you are willing to be disciplined, to do the fundamental sod busting, to kind of break apart what you think and feel and believe, and maybe reassemble it in a new framework, I can assure anyone they're going to make much better decisions once they relieve themselves of what are called inferior thoughts. Now, an example of an inferior thought is something we all have done and probably will continue to. Too much self-doubt, too much worry, a sense of not feeling good enough or being unworthy, fear, regret, even things that border on the edge of hatefulness or resentment. All of those things, they're inferior thoughts, and they fundamentally totally intrude upon a person's ability to be successful. Think of them as a limitation or a barrier. But what if you could examine that and begin to learn to release those? How much that would open up your energy and, more importantly, your imagination to be more creative. Recognize that the ideas that come that are unique to your interest, maybe you have gifts and talents that have yet to be explored. What if you had a great idea come to you that could fundamentally change your life for the better? And that's what I'm trying to teach in my workbook. Everyone has those ideas, but not everyone knows how to recognize them. Everyone has inferior thinking. Not everyone is aware how much that interferes or limits or restricts their insight or their understanding. Or more importantly, that they keep pulling the rug out from under themselves with each decision they make, because they're not making that decision with clarity and confidence to understand that if they're working in integrity within themselves to do what's right for themselves and do it with a willingness to apply their energy, their thoughts, their marvelous thinking power to the capacity that they are naturally born with, that once you apply all of that energy towards seeing that decision come to fruition, then you've sufficiently supplied the cause, all the energy, the thought, the motivation, the feeling to produce a better result, the outcome, just like we talked about earlier, the cause and the effect. And really what I'm teaching people is how to recognize how much more purposeful they can be if they're willing to take a little more of a central role in being that decision maker. They'll feel their confidence go up, they'll see better results, and who among us, if we get a better result, doesn't want to duplicate or replicate what got them there? And then, of course, if you're a great example to me, then perhaps I want to be a better example to myself. A pebble in the pond and the ripple goes out. And it's my hope to take many generations of people that are living today and in the future and making them great decision makers. I want to create new generations of great decision makers. And they can do it through this self-study. It doesn't have to be a year-long process. They don't have to go to Mecca or stand on top of a mountain. The fundamental changes and things that they need, Jolene, are already available to you. There's no geographic cure that's going to get you out of your problem thinking, but you can take some time and honest reflection through these exercises and through some self insights, and not only learn from the journey, but also enjoy the journey. This is about self-discovery that is fun, illuminating, sometimes causes us to ask deeper, more compelling questions of ourselves. But at the end of the day, it's about getting unstuck. So you have more traction in the good things that you can replicate. And because you know as well as I, that we don't just make one big decision in life. There are many decisions we make along the way. Who we want to be in a relationship with. What will my career look like? What type of home do I want to live in? Who do I enjoy surrounding myself with? What are my gifts and talents that should be further explored? All of this with a little more self-examination. And remember, a great decision doesn't take time, but it does take practice. So why not start practicing as soon as we can so that we can get on with making important decisions that can make our life more fulfilling, happier, more joyful, more satisfying. And I don't know about you, Jolene, but that's worth more than gold. If you can be happier, more fulfilled, and be joyful in the way you live your life and conduct your. And that's what I'm hoping to make every reader, enthusiast in this area of personal development enjoy. Not only have taken it to the point of working and offering a workbook and coming out with a new edition, hopefully in October of 2023, but I write a monthly newsletter. I'm in my 6th year starting this month, in the month of August. I write it monthly. It's free to anyone, whether you've read my workbook or not, to help them receive a monthly inspiration, not just an inspiration, but I keep teaching the principles, the elements of better decision making, and showing them real positive reinforcing example. Anyone who would go to my website can sign up for that free. I encourage it to give it as a gift to others. I'm hoping to build, again, new generations of great decision makers. And that's my passion.
Your workbook looks kind of thick. Have you thought about digitizing it like an online notebook where they could fill in? You could make those boxes digital where they can type in. Consider doing that yet?
Well, that is a terrific goal of mine, and it's a great question. I think now with the 2nd edition that will be coming out here in a few months, where the workbook will be a standalone. Like many new authors, I looked at all the different options. Who should publish my workbook? How much independence should I have? How much control do I give over? And I chose to publish my workbook myself and distribute it myself, create the website, create the newsletter, and which requires more resources, time, and energy, that's for sure. But I have a real passion, Jolene, and that's for quality. I wanted the control, which I take as a very positive thing, and to make sure people got really good quality. Now, with this new 2nd edition, I work with a wonderful web designer. Her name is Lori Dennison, and she's a tremendous writer, author, and she does my website and my newsletter. And she has encouraged me to go with a different publisher with the new edition, Ingram Sparks,
Yes.
which we'll be working with. So I'm excited to see how I can get more exposure for my workbook. And to your point, be able to have it in different formats, because a lot of people like their Kindles, they like a digital. And previous to that, if I may, my workbook is spiral bound. I did that so people could crack the cover and write. And it's a little old-fashioned, but people still like it. And I made it so that it could fit into a purse or a valise or something small. But I think this new portability, where it can be on demand, anywhere, anytime, is going to expand to new audiences, which of course is my passion. But I also think, Jolene, that it will allow it to go into an electronic format. Something, by the way, I have yet to learn how that's exactly done. I understand digital, no worries about that, but I'm sure there's a process to make that more accessible to people. So not only can they write, but they can keep a record of their thoughts and inspirations and reflections, which to me would be very important to go back and review, as I'm sure you would agree.
That would be an app. If you want it to be interactive, where they can actually type in their thoughts and keep it on their smartphones or computers or whatever, it's called an app. It's not as hard as you would think it would be to
Well,
create.
I'm all for a little easy peasy in life.
Yep, yep. You charge, $1.99 or $4.99 for it, and they download it to their phone, and they can sit there and tap, 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 and your inspirational quotes from your book come as they work their way through it. And I think once you get it set up, your particular book, workbook, would work really well in an app. Last question. Are you on any of the social media on a regular basis?
Well, you sound like my web designer, Lori Dennison.
The reason why I
Um,
ask is because that's the other way that authors are reaching readers these days, is through
mhm,
social media on a
mhm.
regular basis, and not necessarily talking about your book or your process, but talking about your writing process, about your hobbies, about how the book came to be, taking a passage from teaching them certain portions of it, and sending that out to the world. But you have to be comfortable. You have to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I do think there's additional room for that once we get this new second edition out, that I need to take a little more of an active role. It takes a lot to write a monthly newsletter. I'm the author. I'm the one doing the hard work of putting the thought into what would be important to my readers. I do have several goals, one of which is to be a little more proactive and be more instrumental in navigating that social media. But I also would like to take my workbook, which is really designed as an 8-week self-study. I have taught it as an 8-week Zoom class. I would really like to start putting on my website modules that can be supplementary with interviews and other things and resources to enhance that as a study. I'm also, with this new issue, I'm preparing a free teacher's guide that you're going to be able to go to my website. And if you want to teach this in a small group or a book study, or let's say you have a book club, or you have a church group, or just a group of friends that you all love to get together, I'm going to have a resource to allow people to go out and do that. And people can contact me. They can go to my website, www.poweryourdecisions.com. That's plural, decisions. .com. Ask me to do a Zoom, be a resource, ask me questions. I'm a very open person to help people who are serious about taking this to the level of a course, or let's say you're in the middle of your own self-study and something perhaps needs to be better explained or explored. I'm always invite people to reach out to me. And of course, I'm able to speak to groups and do things with professional meetings where this can be appropriate.
Okay. Well, once you get onto social media, please put it on your website. We'd be happy to refer people so that you can build up your readership. I always go in and share the people I know and subscribe to their feeds and make comments and all that. So it's kind of a circular, what goes around comes around kind of thing. And that way I can keep track of it and see what you're up to.
Well, you're a great role model for that, and I appreciate that. Being a relatively new author of nonfiction, I have gained invaluable knowledge by being part of the Florida Writers Association, the Sunshine Gainesville Authors Consortium. I appreciate you extending your expertise to people like myself, who we might bump into each other as fellow authors, but not have a full appreciation of what each other is trying to create as the craft of writing, or facilitating getting our voices out there. So I greatly appreciate your expertise and would look forward to talking with you more about that. Again, as I shared earlier, it's very important to surround ourselves with great resource people. And you're one of those people.
Well, thank you.
This has been a real pleasure, and I appreciate you taking the time and showing an interest in my writing, and not only what I've written, but where the future may take me.